Part 1. The Powerful Opening Hook. Rewritten, more natural, human, emotional style. There's something people don't really warn you about when you get older. Not the gray hair, not the aching knees, not even the doctor appointments that somehow start filling up your calendar before you notice. It's the quiet. That's the part that catches people off guard. Somewhere after 50, life starts sounding different. The house that used to feel chaotic suddenly feels still. You walk through the kitchen at night and realize nobody left a mess in the sink, no backpacks on the floor, no voices upstairs, no one yelling from another room asking where the charger is, just the refrigerator humming. Maybe the television playing in the background, maybe the sound of your own footsteps. And in moments like that, a question starts creeping into people's minds. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quietly. What actually matters now? Money or people? Most of us spend the first half of life believing we already know the answer. Of course money matters. You need it. You work for it. You chase stability because nobody wants to struggle forever, especially people who grew up with very little. A lot of people over 50 came from families that worried about bills constantly. They remember parents arguing over groceries, gas prices, late rent, broken cars, second jobs. So they promised themselves, my children will never live like this. My family will be safe. I'll work hard now so later we can finally breathe. And honestly, that instinct comes from love most of the time. It really does. The problem is, life moves faster than people expect. 1 minute your kids are small and climbing into your lap while you're trying to answer work emails. Then suddenly they're adults, busy, tired, living in another state, calling less often than they used to. Not because they stopped loving you. Life just pulled everyone in different directions, little by little. That's how distance usually happens, not through cruelty, through time, through postponing things, through saying, I'll call next week. I'm just busy right now. We'll spend more time together once things calm down. But things rarely calm down the way people imagine they will. And one day, people wake up and realize something uncomfortable. They spent decades building a secure life, but quietly lost closeness along the way. You see this everywhere once you start noticing it. There are retired men sitting in beautiful homes they barely enjoy, big kitchens, leather furniture, perfect lawns, and every evening looks exactly the same. Microwave dinner, television noise, scrolling through the phone, falling asleep in a recliner. There are women who spent their entire lives taking care of everybody else, husbands, children, aging parents, and now the house is finally quiet. Too quiet. Some of them walk around Target or Costco longer than necessary just to be around people. Not because they need anything, because loneliness gets heavy when nobody talks to you all day. People don't admit this stuff openly, especially older generations. A lot of them were taught to stay strong, keep working, don't complain, handle your responsibilities. So they carry loneliness silently. You can sit beside someone for years and never realize how empty they feel inside. That's the scary part. And maybe you know someone like this already. Or maybe, if you're being honest tonight, you're starting to recognize pieces of yourself in this conversation. Maybe you've noticed the silence too. Maybe weekends feel different now. Maybe you keep checking your phone hoping someone calls first. Maybe there are people you miss but haven't reached out to because too much time passed and now it feels awkward. That happens more than people think. A strange thing happens after 50. People start thinking more seriously about who would actually show up for them if life suddenly got hard. Not casually, seriously. If you ended up in a hospital bed tomorrow, who comes? Who stays longer than 10 minutes? Who sits there when things get uncomfortable? Would it be the people impressed by your success? The people who loved your money, your position, your usefulness? Or would it be the people you accidentally stopped making time for years ago? That question hits differently once people get older, because after a certain age, everybody starts seeing life more clearly. The distractions weaken a little, careers slow down, energy changes, parents pass away, friends get sick, retirement starts getting closer. And people begin realizing something they didn't fully understand when they were younger. Comfort is not the same thing as connection. A beautiful house can still feel emotionally cold. A full bank account does not hug you during grief. A luxury car still drives home to an empty garage. Money helps. Of course it helps. Anybody saying money doesn't matter is not living in reality, especially now. Medical bills matter. Retirement matters. Security matters. People need stability as they age. But there's another kind of poverty nobody talks about enough: emotional poverty. And honestly, that kind can hurt even more. It's the feeling of having nobody who really knows you anymore. Nobody who remembers who you were before life got heavy. Nobody calling just to hear your voice. Nobody asking, "How are you doing lately?" and actually waiting for the real answer. Some people have plenty of money and still eat dinner alone every single night. That's real. You see it all the time. And meanwhile, there are older couples living in modest little homes, driving old cars, stretching every dollar carefully. Yet somehow their homes feel warm. You walk in and people are laughing, talking, cooking, telling old stories for the 100th time. There's life there. That difference matters. Because human beings can survive without luxury a lot longer than they can survive without emotional connection. People need people. Even the strong ones, even the independent ones, even the people who say they're fine alone, especially after 50. Maybe that's why so many older people eventually stop talking about success the way they used to. When you're young, people ask, "What do you do? How much do you make? What have you achieved?" But later in life, the important questions quietly change. Who still loves you? Who still calls? Who still sits beside you without looking at the clock? Who still feels like home? That's the kind of thing people start thinking about at 2 a.m. when the house is quiet and there's nowhere left to mentally hide. And maybe tonight, before we go any further, it's worth asking yourself something honestly, not the polished answer, not the socially acceptable answer, the real one. Who have you slowly drifted away from? Who have you been meaning to call for years? Who mattered deeply to you once, but somehow life got busy and now the distance feels too big to cross? And maybe the hardest question of all, 10 years from now, what would hurt more? Not making a little more money, or realizing you didn't spend enough time with the people you loved while you still had the chance? Because the truth is, that question gets heavier with age, not lighter. And tonight, we're going to sit with that truth for a while. Not like a lecture, more like two people sitting at the kitchen table late at night after everyone else already went to sleep. Part 2. Deep empathy through different life situations. Rewritten, natural human style. Getting older is strange in ways people don't really explain when you're young. When you're 30 or 40, life feels loud all the time. Phones ringing, schedules packed, kids running through the house, work emails coming in non-stop, weekends disappearing before they even begin. A lot of people spend those years exhausted. But then later, sometimes after 50, sometimes closer to 60, the noise starts fading. And at first, honestly, some people enjoy it. No more rushing everywhere, no more school pickups, no more soccer practice or parent meetings or frantic mornings trying to get everybody out the door. For a little while, the quiet feels earned. Then one day, it feels different. Not peaceful, heavy. That's when people begin noticing little things. The house stays clean because nobody's there to make a mess anymore. The phone doesn't ring much unless it's a scam call or a pharmacy reminder. Some people start turning the television on just to hear another human voice in the room. Not because they care what's playing. They just don't want silence pressing against them all evening. And there are so many different kinds of loneliness people experience after 50. That's the part nobody talks about enough. Not all loneliness looks the same. Take the provider, for example. Almost every family has someone like this. The hardworking father, the constantly busy mother, the person who believed love meant sacrifice. They woke up early for decades, worked overtime, skipped vacations, took extra shifts, said maybe next year, more times than they can count. They were tired all the time, but they kept going because they thought, I'm doing this for my family. And to be fair, they were. A lot of them genuinely loved their families deeply. They just believed providing financially was the highest form of love. Some of them never learned how to express emotion comfortably, especially older generations. Many men were raised hearing things like, don't cry, be strong, handle your responsibilities. So they became providers instead of emotionally open people. That was their language of love. Paying bills, fixing problems, keeping the lights on. But children don't always experience love the same way parents intend it. Kids remember presence. They remember who came to the baseball game, who sat on the edge of the bed during hard nights, who listened when they talked. And sometimes, years later, parents realize something painful. Their children respected their sacrifice, but never really felt emotionally close to them. That realization hits hard, especially after retirement, because suddenly the work stops, the identity disappears, and now there's time. Too much time sometimes. The same father who spent 30 years saying, I'm busy right now sits in the living room hoping someone calls. Sometimes he checks his phone over and over, even though he knows nobody texted. Sometimes he acts like he enjoys being alone. But deep down, a lot of people don't. They just got used to hiding it. And mothers experience their own version of this too. There are women who spent their entire adult lives taking care of everybody, cooking, cleaning, helping with homework, remembering birthdays, keeping the whole family emotionally together. Then, one day the kids move out. The house changes overnight. No shoes by the door, no noise upstairs, no one asking what's for dinner. Some women stand in the kitchen afterward and genuinely don't know what to do with themselves anymore. Their entire identity became caregiving, and now the people they built their whole life around are busy building lives of their own. Again, not because anybody stopped loving each other. Life just moves. That's what makes it sad. Distance usually doesn't happen because of one big fight. It happens slowly. People postpone conversations, get distracted, get tired, get busy. Then years pass before anyone notices how far apart they became. And then there's another kind of loneliness. This one hurts differently. The helper. You probably know someone like this, too. The person everybody depended on. They loaned money when relatives struggled, showed up during funerals, watched people's kids, drove friends to appointments, helped neighbors move furniture, answered late-night phone calls. They were always there for everybody. Always. But eventually life hits them too. Maybe illness, maybe divorce, maybe retirement, maybe grief. And suddenly, almost nobody shows up for them. That realization can break a person emotionally because it forces them to face something painful. Not every relationship was real. Some people were simply attached to convenience. As long as you're useful, people stay close. As long as you can help, people call. But once your energy changes, once your health changes, once your usefulness fades, some people quietly disappear. Older adults notice this more than younger people do because aging strips away illusions. By 60 or 70, most people know exactly who genuinely cares about them. And honestly, sometimes the list is painfully short. Then there's retirement itself. Nobody prepares people emotionally for retirement the way they prepare them financially. Everybody talks about savings. Very few people talk about identity. For 40 years, some people followed the exact same routine every morning. Wake up, get dressed, drive to work, talk to coworkers, solve problems, feel needed. Then suddenly, nothing. No meetings, no deadlines, no structure. At first, it feels relaxing. Then eventually, some retirees wake up and realize they haven't had a meaningful conversation in 3 days. That happens more than people think. Some older adults drive to the grocery store and walk around slowly just to interact with somebody. Cashiers, baristas, pharmacists, anybody, because humans need interaction, even quiet people. especially quiet people sometimes. And maybe the saddest loneliness of all is the loneliness inside marriage. Two people living together for years, sometimes decades, yet emotionally miles apart. No screaming, no drama, just distance. They became roommates instead of partners. Bills replaced conversations. Stress replaced affection. Routine replaced curiosity. Some couples sit across from each other every evening, saying almost nothing beyond, "What do you want for dinner? Did you pay the electric bill? What time is your appointment tomorrow?" That's not hatred. That's emotional exhaustion. And underneath that silence, many of them still miss each other. They miss the younger version of the relationship, when they used to laugh more, talk for hours, go on late-night drives, dream together. But life hardened things. Stress, children, money problems, work, disappointments. People slowly stopped reaching toward each other emotionally, and after enough years pass, restarting feels awkward. So they stay silent, even while sitting 3 feet apart on the same couch. That kind of loneliness is brutal because another person is physically there, but emotionally absent. And if any of this feels familiar tonight, I need you to hear something clearly. You are not the only one, not even close. Millions of people over 50 are carrying these exact feelings quietly. Regret, distance, loneliness, fear, disconnection. Some of them hide it well. Some smile constantly in public, then go home to empty houses. Some stay busy all day because they're afraid of what the silence feels like at night. Some people haven't been hugged in years and never say it out loud. That's real. And maybe the hardest part is this. A lot of older adults secretly wonder if it's too late. Too late to reconnect. Too late to repair family relationships. Too late to become emotionally open. Too late to start over socially. But deep down, most people don't actually want perfection. They just want connection again. One honest conversation, one meaningful friendship, one repaired relationship, one person who truly listens. That's all many people are really hoping for. Not a perfect life, just warmth, just closeness, just somebody who genuinely cares whether they made it home safely at night. And healing usually begins the moment people finally stop pretending they don't need that. Part 3. What do you lose when you only hold on to money? Let's be honest about something before we go deeper. Money matters. Anybody who says it doesn't probably hasn't struggled financially in a long time. After 50, money matters even more in certain ways. Medication costs money. Insurance costs money. Groceries somehow cost twice what they used to. A simple hospital visit can scare people before the bill even arrives. So no, this isn't one of those conversations pretending people should ignore financial responsibility and just focus on love. Real life doesn't work like that. People need stability. People need security, especially when they get older and the body starts becoming less predictable. But there's another side to this that many people don't notice until later. Sometimes, while building a financially secure life, people accidentally stop building an emotionally connected one. Not intentionally. Very few people wake up one morning and decide, I'm going to neglect my relationships for the next 30 years. That's not how it happens. It happens quietly. A missed dinner here, a postponed vacation there, a phone call cut short because work emails keep buzzing, another weekend spent exhausted. And at the time, it all feels temporary. People tell themselves, I'm just busy right now. This is only for a season. Things will calm down later. But then later becomes 10 years, then 20. And emotional distance has a strange way of growing while nobody's paying attention. You know what's sad? A lot of hardworking people genuinely believe they're sacrificing for the people they love. And sometimes they are. That's what makes this complicated. A father works 80 hours a week because he wants his children to have opportunities he never had. A mother pushes herself constantly because she wants her family to feel safe. Those intentions are real, good intentions. But relationships need more than sacrifice. They need presence, too. That's the part people realize late sometimes. Children remember attention differently than adults expect. A child notices who looked up from their phone when they were talking, who came into the room when they were crying, who sat beside them, not just who paid the bills. And spouses feel this too. There are marriages where financially everything looks successful from the outside. Nice house, reliable income, retirement savings, family vacations and old photographs. Yet emotionally, the relationship slowly dried out years ago because people got so busy surviving life that they stopped emotionally living inside it. That happens a lot in America. This culture praises busyness constantly. People admire exhaustion here. Overworked people get treated like heroes sometimes. How many hours are you working? How productive are you? What are you building? What's your next goal? Everybody's chasing something. A promotion, a bigger house, more savings, more status. And meanwhile, people are eating dinner together while barely speaking. Parents are sitting beside children while staring at laptops. Couples are lying in bed scrolling separate phones for an hour before sleep. People are physically near each other, but emotionally somewhere else entirely. That kind of disconnection builds slowly. At first, it barely feels noticeable. Then one day somebody realizes, we haven't had a real conversation in months. Or worse, years. And one of the cruelest things about time is this. You usually don't realize certain moments mattered until they're already gone. The bedtime stories stop. The kids stop asking you to play with them. Parents stop being healthy enough to travel. Friends move away. People pass away unexpectedly. Life closes doors quietly. That's why emotional neglect becomes dangerous. Not dramatic neglect, ordinary neglect, the kind people excuse because they're tired. There are wealthy people right now sitting in enormous homes feeling deeply lonely. You can almost feel it when you walk inside certain houses. Everything looks expensive, but emotionally cold. No warmth, no laughter, no energy, just silence. Perfect furniture nobody really enjoys. Dining tables nobody gathers around anymore. Guest rooms that stay empty year after year. Money creates comfort. It does. But comfort and emotional closeness are not the same thing. A retirement account can reduce stress. It cannot reduce grief. A luxury vacation cannot repair emotional distance between family members. A beautiful house still feels lonely when nobody wants to visit. And after 50, loneliness starts feeling heavier than it did when people were younger. At 25, loneliness feels temporary. People think, I'll meet somebody. I'll make new friends. Life is just busy right now. At 65, loneliness can feel frightening because aging changes the emotional landscape. Friends start getting sick. Funerals become more common. Energy decreases. Time suddenly feels limited in a way it never did before. People start asking bigger questions. Who really knows me? Who genuinely cares about me outside of what I can provide? Who would stay if I became weak? That last question changes people because aging exposes transactional relationships. Some people are around because of what you offer them, your money, your influence, your usefulness, your energy. But once those things fade, they fade too. That realization hurts more than many older adults admit, especially men. A lot of older men were never taught how to emotionally connect deeply. They were taught duty, responsibility, strength, not vulnerability, not emotional honesty. Many men over 50 still struggle to say simple things out loud. I miss you. I've been lonely lately. I need help. I love you. I'm sorry. So instead, they stay emotionally guarded, even when they desperately want closeness. And over time, emotional isolation becomes a habit. That's the scary thing about loneliness. People adapt to it. They normalize it. They stop expecting connection because disappointment feels safer than hope. Some older adults go years pretending they prefer being alone, when the truth is, they just forgot how to reach people anymore. Or they're afraid of rejection, Or they waited too long and don't know how to begin again. And meanwhile, the human heart keeps wanting the same thing it always wanted: belonging. Not attention from strangers, not admiration. Real belonging. Somebody asking if you got home safe. Somebody noticing when you sound tired. Somebody remembering little details about your life. Somebody who genuinely wants your company, even when you have nothing impressive left to offer. That kind of connection becomes priceless later in life, far more valuable than people realize when they're younger. And here's the strange irony. A lot of people spend their healthiest years sacrificing relationships to build a future they hope to eventually enjoy with the very people they slowly drifted away from. That's painful to admit, but it's true sometimes. And none of this means ambition is wrong. Working hard isn't wrong. Building wealth isn't wrong. The danger begins when people accidentally build an entire life around achievement while starving the emotional side of themselves. Because eventually, careers slow down, bodies slow down, noise fades, and when all that distraction disappears, people are finally left alone with the emotional condition of their lives. That moment tells the truth about everything. Part 4. Small changes that can transform later life. Rewritten, natural human style. Now, after hearing all of this, some people probably feel a little heavy inside, maybe even regretful. That's understandable, because once people start honestly looking at their relationships, a lot of emotions come up. Guilt, distance, missed years, conversations that never happened. But here's something important. Life is not over at 50, or 60, or 70. A lot of people act like emotional growth belongs only to the young. That's not true at all. Some of the warmest, deepest, most meaningful changes happen later in life. Not because older people suddenly become perfect. Actually, the opposite. Sometimes aging softens people. People get tired of pretending, tired of ego, tired of unnecessary pride, and they finally begin saying things they should have said years earlier. The beautiful part is this. Healing usually doesn't begin with giant, dramatic moments. It starts small. Almost painfully small sometimes. A phone call. That's it. One phone call can reopen a relationship that sat silent for 10 years. Not perfectly, not instantly, but enough to let a little warmth back in. There are people right now thinking about someone they miss, and both sides are waiting for the other person to reach out first. That happens all the time. 2 siblings waiting, 2 old friends waiting, a parent and child both waiting. And meanwhile, years keep moving. Sometimes pride steals more years from people than anger ever did. And honestly, reconnecting later in life can feel awkward at first, especially for older generations who aren't used to emotional conversations. Sometimes people don't know what to say, so they avoid saying anything at all. But usually, sincerity matters more than perfect words. A simple, "Hey, I was thinking about you." That alone can crack open years of silence. Or, "I know it's been too long." Or, "I miss talking to you." People underestimate how powerful simple honesty can be, especially now, because most adults are starving for genuine connection. Everybody's distracted. Everybody's rushing. Everybody's emotionally exhausted. A sincere moment stands out now because it's become rare. And another thing people slowly learn later in life, attention is love. Real attention, not distracted listening, not half listening while staring at a screen. Actual presence. You can feel the difference immediately when somebody is truly with you emotionally. Older people notice this deeply with grandchildren. A child doesn't care whether your house is expensive. They care whether you get down on the floor and play with them, whether you laugh at their stories, whether you look into their eyes while they're talking. That becomes a memory. People remember emotional atmosphere more than material things. A lot of adults still remember exactly how certain homes felt when they were children. Some homes felt warm, safe, relaxed. Other homes felt tense, even when they looked perfect from the outside. That emotional atmosphere matters more than people realize. And honestly, one of the saddest habits many families have is waiting too long to say loving things out loud, especially older generations. A lot of parents loved deeply, but rarely expressed it verbally. Some people grew up in homes where affection was shown through hard work, not words. Dad fixed the roof. Mom cooked every meal. Bills got paid. Needs were handled. But nobody said, "I'm proud of you. I love you. I'm grateful for you." So years pass with people emotionally assuming things instead of expressing them. Then eventually, someone dies, and suddenly all the words come pouring out at the funeral. People standing beside a casket finally saying things they were too uncomfortable to say face to face. That happens constantly. And it's heartbreaking every single time. Because most people are not asking for perfection. They just want warmth, recognition, affection, connection. A sincere, "I appreciate you," means more to some older adults than expensive gifts ever could, especially after years of feeling unnoticed. And community matters too, more than people think. One reason loneliness becomes dangerous later in life is because people slowly stop belonging anywhere. Children move away. Coworkers disappear after retirement. Health issues reduce social activity. Without community, days start blending together. That's why some older adults emotionally improve once they join simple things: church groups, volunteer programs, morning walking clubs, neighborhood breakfasts, Bible studies, community gardening groups. Nothing glamorous, just human connection. People sitting together, talking, laughing, feeling seen again. You know what's interesting? Some of the happiest older people are not necessarily the richest. They're the ones still connected to life. The ones with somebody to drink coffee with in the morning, somewhere to go on Tuesdays. People who notice when they're absent. That matters. Deeply. Purpose matters too. A lot of retirees struggle emotionally because work gave them identity for decades. Once the job disappears, they quietly wonder, what am I useful for now? That question can become dangerous emotionally because human beings need meaning, not just entertainment, meaning. And older adults still have enormous value: wisdom, patience, perspective, stories, guidance. Some younger people desperately need older voices around them, healthy older voices, not bitter people, not constantly angry people, grounded people, warm people, people who learned from life instead of hardening completely because of it. And maybe one of the most important changes people can make after 50 is this: stop trying to replace emotional presence with financial gestures. A lot of families do this without realizing it. Parents buy gifts instead of spending time. Adult children send money but rarely visit. Spouses provide financially while remaining emotionally unavailable. Again, financial help matters, absolutely. But human beings need more than transactions. They need connection. A conversation during dinner, a hand on the shoulder, a long drive together, a slow morning talking over coffee. Simple moments become sacred later in life. That's something aging teaches people. Not everything meaningful has to be impressive. Some of the best moments happen quietly. Sitting on a porch together at sunset, talking in the kitchen after everybody else went to sleep, listening to old stories you've already heard 10 times before. That's real life. And the encouraging thing is this: people can change emotionally even after decades of distance. Not overnight. Movies lie about that. Real healing is slower, sometimes awkward, sometimes messy, sometimes emotional. But possible. One apology can soften years of tension. One honest conversation can reopen a relationship people thought was gone forever. Not every relationship will heal, that's true. Some wounds run deep. But many people are far more emotionally reachable than pride makes us believe. And often, the second half of life becomes meaningful not because somebody finally earned enough money, but because they finally slowed down enough to truly love people while there's still time left. Part 5. The story of a man who realized too late. Rewritten, natural human style. Let me tell you about somebody. Not because his story is unusual, actually, because it's painfully common. His name was Richard, and if you met him 20 years ago, you probably would have respected him immediately. Most people did. He carried himself like a man who had his life together. Clean shirts, firm handshake, always busy, always moving. Richard grew up in Ohio in a small house that always seemed cold during winter. Not emotionally cold, financially cold. His father worked long factory shifts and came home exhausted every night, smelling like metal and machine oil. His mother cleaned houses for extra money. They survived, barely sometimes. Richard remembered hearing arguments about bills through thin walls when he was a kid. He remembered pretending to sleep while his parents whispered anxiously in the kitchen late at night. That kind of childhood changes people. Some children grow up afraid of failure. Richard grew up afraid of being poor. So very early in life, he made a decision. He would never struggle financially again. Never. And honestly, he worked unbelievably hard to escape that life. Nobody handed him anything. He studied constantly, worked part-time jobs, took extra shifts, stayed late at the office when everyone else went home. He became successful the American way people love talking about: hard work, discipline, sacrifice. By his late 50s, Richard had everything most people spend their lives chasing: big house, nice neighborhood, luxury SUV in the driveway, retirement accounts, golf club membership, the whole picture. People called him successful all the time, and financially, he absolutely was. But there was another side to Richard's life almost nobody noticed. He missed a lot while building that success: school plays, baseball games, weekend trips, anniversaries. His family got used to hearing, "I have to work, maybe next weekend. I'm doing this for us." And the thing is, Richard believed that, completely. He loved his family, deeply. But love came out of him through responsibility instead of emotional presence. That's how many men from his generation were raised. Provide, protect, keep moving. So he kept working, even when his wife Linda started getting quieter over the years. Linda wasn't dramatic about it. That's important. She didn't scream, didn't threaten divorce, didn't constantly complain, which almost made it worse. She just slowly stopped expecting much emotionally. That happens in long marriages sometimes. One person keeps postponing connection, the other person slowly gives up asking for it. And eventually silence settles into the relationship like dust. Not noticeable at first, then suddenly it's everywhere. Richard barely saw it happening because work kept rewarding him. At the office, he felt important, needed, respected. At home, things felt emotionally complicated. So without realizing it, he spent more and more energy in the place where he felt successful. Work became easier than intimacy. A lot of people do this, especially men who never learned how to talk openly about emotion. Years passed fast, faster than Richard expected. His son moved to Arizona, his daughter got married and settled in another state. The house got quieter. Linda started spending more time gardening. Richard joked about retirement for years, like it was some distant reward waiting for him at the finish line. Then, suddenly, it arrived. And at first, he loved it. No alarm clock, no meetings, no stress. For about 3 months. Then something strange started happening. The silence got louder. That's the only way to describe it. Mornings stretched endlessly. Richard would wake up at 6 out of habit, walk into the kitchen, pour coffee, then just stand there staring out the window while the neighborhood slowly woke up around him. People leaving for work, kids waiting for school buses, dogs being walked. Everybody seemed to have somewhere to be except him. Linda still had routines: gardening, book club, church friends. Richard realized he didn't really have any close friendships outside work, not real ones. Coworkers disappeared surprisingly fast after retirement. The phone stopped ringing. Nobody needed him anymore. That hit him harder than he expected. One afternoon, he sat in his living room looking around the house he worked 40 years to afford and realized it didn't feel the way he imagined it would. It looked successful, but it didn't feel alive. His daughter called occasionally, his son texted once in a while, but conversations felt polite now, careful, surface level, not warm. And Richard started noticing something painful. He didn't really know how to emotionally talk to his own children anymore. He knew how to provide for them, advise them, help them financially. But emotional closeness? That part felt awkward, almost unfamiliar. One night, Linda was sitting across from him watching television when Richard suddenly realized they had barely spoken all evening. Not fighting, not angry, just existing near each other quietly. And for the first time in years, he felt scared. Not of dying, of emptiness. That feeling stayed with him for months. Then winter came, and one night around 2 a.m, Richard woke up with crushing chest pain. Real pain. The kind that immediately makes people afraid. Everything moved fast after that. Ambulance lights outside the house, cold hospital hallways, machines beeping, doctors talking quickly, and suddenly all the things Richard spent decades worrying about, deadlines, investments, business pressure, none of it mattered anymore. Lying in that hospital bed in the middle of the night, Richard stared at the ceiling and started replaying his life differently. Not financially, emotionally. That's what people do when life suddenly becomes fragile. Nobody lays in a hospital bed thinking, I wish I answered more emails. People think about faces, conversations, regrets, distance, love. Richard started realizing how many moments he rushed through, how many dinners he mentally skipped even while physically sitting there, how many times Linda tried to connect while he stayed distracted. How many years passed while he kept promising himself he'd slow down later. Then came the moment that broke him emotionally. He looked around the room and realized almost none of the people he spent decades trying to impress were there. No business associates, no clients, no industry friends, just Linda, sitting beside him, quietly holding his hand. The same woman he emotionally neglected for years was still there, still showing up. That kind of love humbles people, especially older people. At one point, Richard looked at her with tears in his eyes and said something he probably should have admitted 20 years earlier. He said, I spent my whole life learning how to make money, but I never really learned how to stay close to people. Linda cried quietly. Not dramatic movie tears, the exhausted kind, the kind built from years of loneliness nobody ever fully talked about. And something shifted inside Richard after that night. Not instantly. Real people don't transform overnight. But slowly, honestly. He started calling his children more often, not to lecture them, not to give financial advice, just to talk. At first, the conversations felt stiff. Then, gradually, they softened. He started taking walks with Linda in the evenings, simple walks, no phones, no distractions. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they didn't, but even silence started feeling warmer than before. Richard apologized, too, awkwardly sometimes. People from his generation often struggle with apologies because vulnerability feels unnatural to them. But he tried. That mattered. He joined a volunteer group helping older veterans, started reconnecting with old friends, went back to church after years away. And slowly, life started feeling human again. Not exciting, not glamorous, human. That's the word. Near the end of his life, Richard once told someone something beautiful. He said, "Success made me comfortable, but relationships made me feel alive." There's a difference, a huge difference. And a lot of people don't understand that difference until very late. Richard's story matters because millions of people are quietly living versions of it right now, working constantly, postponing emotional life, assuming there will always be more time later. Then one day they wake up and realize the people they were trying to build a life for slowly learned how to live without them emotionally. That realization hurts deeply. But here's the hopeful part. As long as people are still alive, connection can still grow, even late, even after years of distance. Sometimes the second half of life becomes meaningful not because everything turned out perfectly, but because people finally stop running long enough to understand what they should have been protecting all along. Part 6. Why balance matters more than extremes. Now, after hearing all this, some people might swing too far in the other direction. They might start thinking, so money doesn't matter at all? Relationships are everything. Maybe people should stop chasing success. But life is more complicated than that, because struggling financially in old age is frightening too, very frightening. Anybody who has watched elderly parents worry about money understands this immediately. There's a particular kind of stress older people carry when finances become unstable. You can see it in little behaviors. Saving leftover napkins from restaurants, standing in grocery aisles comparing prices for 10 minutes, pretending they already ate because they don't want to spend money eating out. A lot of older adults become quietly anxious about becoming burdens, especially proud people, especially parents. There are elderly people who skip medication because prescriptions cost too much, people who avoid turning on the heat during winter to save money. People lying awake at night calculating how long retirement savings will last. That fear is real. And love alone cannot erase that kind of pressure. A warm family matters deeply, but so does stability. So this conversation isn't about rejecting money. It's about understanding where money belongs in life. Money is a tool, an important tool, a necessary one, but it was never meant to become somebody's entire identity. That's where people get lost sometimes, especially in cultures where achievement becomes tied to self-worth. A lot of people secretly believe, if I stop producing, I stop mattering. That mindset follows people into old age, and when retirement comes, some people emotionally collapse because work was the only place they felt valuable. That's heartbreaking, because human beings are worth more than productivity. Older people are worth more than what they earn, but financial preparation still matters, very much. There's dignity in being able to care for yourself, in not living under constant panic, and having enough saved to breathe a little easier later in life. The healthiest older adults usually understand balance, not extremes. That's the word that matters here, balance. Enough money to live with dignity, enough emotional connection to live with warmth. Both matter. People become miserable when either side disappears completely. Too much focus on money, relationships dry out. Too little financial responsibility, stress destroys peace. A lot of marriages suffer under financial pressure. People don't like admitting this, but money problems strain relationships heavily. Arguments grow, fear grows, embarrassment grows. Adult children start feeling overwhelmed trying to support aging parents financially while managing their own lives too. Guilt enters the relationship. Tension enters the relationship. And suddenly, love gets tangled up with exhaustion. That's why balance matters so much. Not obsession, not extremes, balance. And honestly, many people don't understand this until middle age forces them to. Life humbles people eventually. Health issues, job losses, aging parents, unexpected emergencies. These things teach people quickly that both emotional support and financial wisdom matter. One without the other creates instability. And one mistake many people make in their 40s and 50s is believing emotional life can always wait. People postpone living emotionally. They postpone joy, connection, rest. They tell themselves, I'll spend more time with family after this project. I'll slow down after retirement. I'll finally enjoy life once everything is secure. But later is a dangerous word sometimes, because life doesn't pause while people are making plans. Children keep growing, parents keep aging, bodies keep changing. And relationships left unattended don't automatically stay healthy. People assume love maintains itself naturally forever. It doesn't. Connection requires care, just like anything alive does. A marriage ignored long enough starts feeling distant. Friendships ignored long enough quietly disappear. Even close family relationships weaken without attention. Not immediately, gradually. That's why emotional neglect is so deceptive. People don't notice the damage while it's happening. Then one day they look around and realize, I don't really know these people anymore. Or worse, they don't really know me. Another thing aging teaches people is the difference between admiration and love. Those two things are not the same at all. Success attracts admiration. Money attracts attention. Status attracts people. But weakness reveals love. That's the test. Who stays when things become inconvenient? Who visits the hospital? Who answers late-night phone calls? Who checks on you after surgery? Who notices when you sound tired? That's real connection. And by the time people reach their 60s or 70s, many realize they would rather have 3 genuine relationships than 100 shallow ones. Depth starts mattering more than quantity. Aging changes priorities naturally. Young people often chase excitement. Older people start craving peace, not boringness, peace. There's a difference. A peaceful dinner with people you love starts feeling more valuable than impressing strangers. Quiet mornings become meaningful. Simple conversations become meaningful. Ordinary life becomes meaningful. That shift surprises a lot of people, especially highly ambitious people, because eventually many successful adults realize they spent years trying to impress people they don't even think about anymore. Meanwhile, the relationships that truly mattered needed attention the whole time. That realization can sting, but it can also wake people up emotionally. And maybe that's part of wisdom. Not becoming anti-success, not becoming anti-money, just finally understanding limits. Money can create comfort, but comfort alone cannot cure loneliness. Money can pay for care, but it cannot force somebody to genuinely care. Money can provide options, but it cannot create belonging. That part still comes from human connection. Always. Especially later in life. Because eventually, almost everybody reaches a point where emotional safety becomes more valuable than social status. People stop asking, how impressive is my life? And start asking, who actually feels safe to me? That question changes everything. And honestly, the people who age best emotionally are usually not the richest people. They're the people who learned how to stay connected while still handling responsibility. The people who built lives instead of just careers. The people who protected both stability and closeness at the same time. That's the balance most people are really searching for, even if they don't realize it yet. Part 7. Reflecting on the Teachings of Christ. Rewritten, natural human style. There's something that happens to a lot of people as they get older. They begin thinking more about the soul. Not in a dramatic way necessarily, just quietly. Questions start showing up during ordinary moments, while driving home, while sitting in church, while lying awake at night, while looking through old photographs nobody has touched in years. People begin asking themselves things they were too busy to ask when life moved faster. Did I live well? Did I love people well? Did I become softer with age or harder? Did I spend my life chasing things that actually mattered? Those questions hit differently after 50, especially once people start losing things. Parents, friends, health, energy, time. Aging has a way of stripping away illusion. Things that once felt extremely important suddenly don't feel as heavy anymore. Arguments, status, impressing people, winning. A lot of that starts looking smaller later in life. And for many people, faith becomes more meaningful during those years. Not because they suddenly become perfect Christians overnight, not at all. Actually, many older adults come back to faith carrying regret, weariness, questions, loneliness. Sometimes they return because they're tired in the soul. That kind of tiredness is hard to explain unless you've felt it. And there's a verse in Scripture that starts sounding very different once people have lived long enough. Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. When people are younger, they often hear that verse and immediately think it's only about money. But it's deeper than that, much deeper. It's really asking, what has your heart been attached to all these years? Because whatever people chase relentlessly eventually shapes them. If someone spends 40 years obsessed only with achievement, their inner life changes. If somebody spends decades constantly competing, proving themselves, chasing status, eventually the soul gets tired. Dry even. Not immediately, slowly. That's the thing about emotional emptiness. It grows quietly. Some people become financially successful while emotionally shrinking inside. And Christianity never really taught that money itself was evil. A lot of people misunderstand that. The deeper warning was always about attachment, about worshiping achievement, worshiping accumulation, worshiping success, about slowly allowing money to replace compassion, or replacing relationships, or replacing God. Because human beings were never designed to feed the soul with possessions alone. People need meaning. They need mercy, forgiveness, belonging, hope. That becomes incredibly obvious later in life, especially when people begin realizing how temporary everything physical actually is. The expensive car eventually gets old. The career ends. The body weakens. Time humbles everybody eventually, and in those quieter years, many older adults start noticing something surprising. Inner peace matters more than outward success. A lot more. You can see it in older people who genuinely carry peace inside them. Sometimes they don't have much money at all, yet they radiate calm, warmth, gentleness. Meanwhile, some wealthy people remain restless constantly, still chasing, still anxious, still emotionally unsettled. That difference usually has very little to do with possessions. It has to do with the condition of the heart. And one thing Jesus emphasized over and over again was relationship. Not performance, relationship. Love your neighbor, forgive people, care for people, sit with people, serve people. There's something deeply human about the way Christ moved through the world. He noticed people others ignored: the lonely, the sick, the rejected, the grieving. And honestly, older adults often understand this part of Christianity more deeply than younger people do. Because loneliness becomes more visible with age, older people notice invisible suffering faster. They can spot it in somebody's eyes, in someone sitting alone after church, in the hesitation before somebody says, "I'm fine." Life teaches people how much hidden pain exists in the world. And faith communities become important partly because they give people somewhere to belong. That matters enormously after retirement. Churches, prayer groups, Bible studies, community meals, not just for religious activity, for connection, for seeing familiar faces, for being remembered, for having somebody ask, "How have you been doing lately?" People underestimate how healing that simple question can be, especially when it's sincere. And maybe one of the most comforting spiritual truths later in life is this: people are not permanently trapped by their mistakes. A lot of older adults carry regret. Regret about parenting, marriage, distance, missed years, words they never said. Some carry guilt quietly for decades. And the beautiful thing about grace is that grace leaves room for return. Return to God, return to people, return to tenderness. It's never too late to soften emotionally, never too late to apologize, never too late to reconnect with your children, never too late to become kinder. A lot of people think aging automatically makes people wiser. That's not entirely true. Some people age and become bitter. Others age and become gentle. The difference often comes from whether pain hardened the heart or humbled it. That's why spiritually healthy older adults feel so comforting to be around. They stop trying to impress people. They listen more, judge less, love more patiently. There's a steadiness about them. And honestly, the world desperately needs older people like that right now. Not just successful older people. Not just wealthy older people. Grounded people. People with wisdom, compassion, perspective. People who understand that human value has nothing to do with productivity anymore. That matters because modern culture quietly teaches people the opposite. It tells people, you matter if you produce. You matter if you achieve. You matter if you stay useful. But Christianity teaches something radically different. People matter because they are human beings loved by God, even when they're weak, even when they're old, even when they're no longer impressive. That truth becomes deeply healing for many older adults who feel forgotten after retirement. And near the end of life, many people stop measuring success the way they used to. The scoreboard changes. People care less about titles, less about status, less about appearances, and more about questions like, did I love people well? Did I become compassionate? Did I make life warmer for others? Was I emotionally present? Because when people reach the final chapters of life, very few wish they had worked more weekends. Most wish they had loved more openly, more honestly, more courageously. That realization humbles almost everybody eventually. And maybe faith exists partly to help people understand that truth before time slips away completely. Part 8. Conclusion and Call to Action. Rewritten, natural human style. So now we come back to the question we started with. After 50, what matters more, money or relationships? And honestly, by this point, maybe the answer feels less simple than it did at the beginning, because life is rarely one extreme or the other. People need enough money to live with dignity. That matters. Nobody wants to spend old age terrified of medical bills or depending completely on exhausted family members. Security matters. But after a certain point in life, people also begin realizing something else. Comfort is not the same thing as happiness, and achievement is not the same thing as closeness. A person can spend decades building a successful life and still feel emotionally alone inside it. That's the part many people discover too late, because eventually life stops asking, "How impressive are you?" and starts asking, "Who's sitting beside you now?" That question changes everything, especially after 50. At some point, the things people thought would matter forever slowly lose emotional weight. The fancy car becomes normal. The promotions become old stories. Even the big accomplishments eventually fade into memory. But relationships? Those stay emotionally alive inside people. A conversation with your daughter, a long dinner with old friends, holding your spouse's hand during a difficult season, hearing your grandchild laugh from the next room. Those moments stay, not because they were dramatic, because they were real. And that's something aging teaches people over and over again. The moments that matter most usually look ordinary while they're happening. Nobody realizes, this is the memory I'll treasure someday. It's just dinner, just a car ride, just sitting together on the porch. Then years pass, and suddenly those small moments become priceless in memory. That's why so many older adults eventually start craving simpler things. Not because they gave up on life, because they finally understand life differently. Peace becomes attractive. Warmth becomes attractive. A quiet evening with people you love becomes more valuable than impressing strangers. And maybe that's wisdom. Not becoming cynical, not rejecting ambition, just finally understanding what deserves the center of your life and what was only supposed to support it. Money was always supposed to support life, not replace it. And if somebody listening tonight feels lonely, I want to say something carefully here. Please don't assume it's too late. People do this all the time after 50. They think, the distance is too big now. My children probably don't care anymore. My friendships are gone. My marriage is too cold to repair. Sometimes that's fear talking more than reality, because human beings are often waiting for permission to reconnect emotionally. They just don't know how to begin. And yes, some relationships are deeply broken. Some wounds are real. But not every disconnected relationship is beyond healing. Sometimes pride simply sat in the way too long. Sometimes people got busy and never corrected course. Sometimes years passed before anybody realized how emotionally far apart they became. But warmth can still return. Awkwardly at first, maybe. Slowly. One conversation at a time. One honest moment at a time. One phone call at a time. And honestly, older adults don't usually need huge social circles to feel emotionally fulfilled. Most people eventually realize they don't need hundreds of relationships. They need a few real ones. A few people who genuinely care. A few people they can call when life gets heavy. A few people who still feel like home. That's enough for many people. More than enough. And if you're listening tonight while still deeply buried in work, still constantly chasing the next achievement, still postponing emotional life until later, maybe this conversation is your warning. Not to stop working hard, not to abandon responsibility, but to stop assuming emotional connection can always wait. Because time moves quietly. That's what surprises people most. Nobody notices life changing while it's happening. Children grow up gradually. Parents age gradually. Friendships fade gradually. Then one day people look around and wonder where everybody went. And the painful truth is, many relationships don't break suddenly. They drift, silently, slowly, through inattention. That's why presence matters so much. Real presence, looking people in the eye when they speak, putting the phone down during dinner, sitting with somebody when they're hurting instead of trying to immediately fix everything, being emotionally available. That's what people remember later. Not perfection, presence. There's that word again, presence. It sounds simple, but it may be one of the most important words in life. A lot of older adults would probably tell younger people the same thing if they had the chance. Be there, really there. Not physically nearby while mentally distracted, actually there. Because in the end, people rarely remember exactly how much money someone earned. They remember how that person made them feel. Safe, loved, seen, welcome. That emotional memory lasts long after careers end, long after appearances fade, long after achievements stop mattering. And maybe tonight, before this video ends, there's somebody already sitting in your mind, somebody you miss, somebody you've been meaning to call, somebody you love but haven't spoken to honestly in a long time. Maybe this is your moment. Not tomorrow, not someday, now. Send the message. Make the call. Visit your parents while they're still here. Sit beside your spouse without distractions for once. Tell your children you love them, even if it feels awkward, especially if it feels awkward. Because one day, all of this becomes memory. Every ordinary Tuesday, every family dinner, every conversation in the kitchen late at night, all of it. And eventually, people realize the real wealth of life was never just money sitting in an account somewhere. It was the people who stayed, the people who answered your calls, the people who knew your flaws and loved you anyway, the people who sat beside you during hard seasons without needing anything in return. That's wealth too, maybe the greatest kind. And if this conversation touched something inside you tonight, leave the word peace in the comments. Not because life is perfect, nobody's life is, but because maybe all of us, especially as we get older, are slowly learning what truly deserves our time before life becomes quiet.